Standard Bank is a veteran in South Africa as far as financial institutions go, and we are here with Wendy Dobson, not a veteran, but certainly here at COP27 to tell us all about Standard Bank's ambitions with respect to Africa's climate action. Thank you for joining us, Wendy.
Thank you.
So what are you seeing here, and how is Standard Bank taking all these new developments, negotiations happening in Africa? How do you feel? How is it represented?
Well, Standard Bank is Africa's biggest bank, and we operate in 20 countries across the continent. So we want to bank Africa's just energy transition. We see it as being vital to our purpose, which is to drive Africa's growth. We see our home as being Africa. So what's been exciting for me over the last few days is to really see the voice of Africa coming through strongly in the negotiations of the governments, the African Union, the different pavilions from African countries, as we're really starting to put our voice forward about what Africa needs for a just energy transition, and Standard Bank wants to play its role in delivering on that.
And just what is Standard Bank's take when it comes to transition finance? It's across the whole system, the whole value chain. How does it take it, and what does it want to really reform in this space to make it a reality in Africa?
Well, we have to be realistic that Africa has a lot of needs. Over 600 million Africans don't have access to electricity at the moment. To meet those needs, to allow Africans to live a life with dignity and to their legitimate aspirations to be met, we need to provide energy to them. And that can't just be overnight, only renewable energy. So we do have to transition, and gas is going to play a role in that transition. So part of decarbonizing the economy in Africa is to move from using paraffin, firewood, to gas, and then to renewables over a period of time. So we see that as quite critical. And for us, transition finance means financing that over time takes carbon out of the economy and the energy mix, but it is a process that will only happen over time.
Oh yes, absolutely. As the least contributors on the planet, it would be unfair to expect Africa to make that change overnight. And as you said, having over 600 million people still not connected to the grid. What are some partnerships that you're seeing? The fact that you come with this fair perspective, what are you seeing here? How fair does the finance situation seem at COP27?
Well, there's been a lot of talk yesterday at Finance Day at COP27 about the needs that Africa has, the financial needs, what we need to do to attract the capital to Africa to fund this transition process. And I think what's been interesting is the role of different stakeholders coming together, whether it's government, the multilateral development banks, private sector banks, asset managers, looking at how we collaborate, how we play our different roles in this, but also recognizing that we can't do it by ourselves. We really need the global north to come to the party. And we need to look at a couple of things. I think loss and damage is a big issue at this COP, and correctly so. But we also need to look at things like voluntary carbon markets. How do we put an economic value on Africa's natural resources, its forests, its conservation areas, and so on, and its role as a carbon sink for the world?
Yes, considering the fact that Africa only has about 2% of the world's voluntary carbon markets, it's atrocious considering the potential it holds. Tell me a little bit about that. How is Standard Bank involved in that, and what are you hoping to achieve from the carbon markets in Africa, which are still untapped?
Well, we think there's a big opportunity here. We think that if we can get the right kinds of projects and look at how to scale that up, supported by the right regulatory framework, we can really have a strong commercial value proposition to other parts of the world where we can offset that carbon. Pay Africa to protect its forest, pay us to protect our wildlife, for example, put an economic value on it so Africans have a stake in this. So we are working with partners in South Africa. We're working with our National Treasury to look at how do we actually put in the frameworks to do this, but with credibility. There can be greenwashing in respect of carbon offsets. So we have to make sure it has integrity, that when you're doing this properly. But we think that if we can commercialize this, it will really help Africa in its fight to deal with climate change.
Absolutely. All of this needs to be dealt with a lot of responsibility. Now, how do you look at the UN responsibility banking points? How does that figure into Standard Bank's efforts in Africa?
Well, Standard Bank is a founding signatory to the United Nations Principles for Responsible Banking, and I'm also the co-chair of the banking board. And it's very important for us to be part of this because it's about a commitment to achieving the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement as well as the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And it's about how do we achieve those through our core business. So how do we, through our banking products and services, through our lending, through our clients, actually have a positive impact on the lives of Africa. It's people, it's companies, it's enterprises. And the Principles for Responsible Banking provide a framework for measuring that contribution and reporting on that contribution. But it's also a great place to learn from other banks around the world, other banks in Africa, banks in Latin America, Europe, and so on. So we're very proud to be, a founding signatory to that initiative. Over 300 banks around the world have now signed up to the principles.
That is a good number. Thank you so much for joining us. There you have it. IPCC report, the fifth report, said that it was critical now more than ever for all financial instruments and institutions to take into account climate change mitigation and adaptation, something that Standard Bank seems to be promising to do. Here at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, another conversation with Africa's big bank, Standard Bank, with Greg Fife. Thank you for joining us, Greg. Tell us about the new 200 million bond, green bond. How is it going? Where is it being released and who's accessing it?
Well, you're referring to our first inaugural green bond, which we issued a couple of years ago. In fact, it was the first of 3 green bonds that we've issued. The proceeds of those bonds are used exclusively for renewable energy. And in addition, we have issued a social bond under the sustainability segment of the JSE, which was a bond we issued last year, and that's for specific application in a segment within our low-income housing business.
Oh, that sounds great. I've also read that Standard Bank's recent lending, a major chunk of it comprised of green projects only. Tell us a little about that, and that also shows a lot of trust being put into this currently risky sector in Africa, as many would call it.
Well, we've made good progress, I think, on our renewable energy book. We have been a significant lender both in South Africa and across the continent into renewable energy. We've also provided guidance in our climate policy earlier this year that we would look to fund up to 65 or at least 65 billion rands worth of funding into renewable energy and to keep at least 50 billion of that on our balance sheet. So we've made good progress, I think, to date, historically in respect of our lending to renewable energy, as well as made certain commitments going to the future. That's a 3-year commitment, and we're well on track for that at this stage.
Now, all of these commitments show your conviction in this just transition phase of Africa. How else are you involved across Africa? What kind of investments are you making, and what kind of investments are you able to draw into Africa?
Well, renewable energy is absolutely critical as a source of energy for the continent. From a broader sustainable financing perspective, we see our role as helping our clients in particular to transition, and that's right across different sectors. So part of our ambition over the next couple of years, as we've indicated in our policy also, is to deploy at least 250 or mobilize 250 billion rands worth of sustainable finance, and a big portion of that will be into transition and helping our customers in all segments and sectors of the economy to transition to be competitive in a lower carbon world.
Now, as a veteran in Africa's financial space, here at COP27 being deemed one of the most critical, time-bound decision-making COPs, what are you seeing in terms of investment for Africa?
The narrative certainly is very positive in respect of investment into the continent. There have been various promises made in the past. So we remain hopeful that that capital flow will materialize. And as an African bank, this is our home. We hope to play an important role in that mobilization. So we remain optimistic.
Any new partnerships happening here at COP27 for Standard Bank? Have you met people who are like-minded organizations that are willing to commit the way you want to?
Absolutely. I mean, it is an incredible forum of institutions, stakeholders that have climate concerns close to their heart. So that's an important issue for us as an African bank. So we're absolutely using this opportunity to leverage and build relationships with many stakeholders.
There you have it, Standard Bank. Greg Fife seems to think that it is a positive COP this year. Well, they've been doing incredible work, and they can only hope that others join in. This is here, Standard Bank from COP27. Now, Standard Bank here has been doing some promising work when it comes to innovative financial instruments. But let's see how happy or how disappointed are they here at COP27. Joined by Wendy here from Standard Bank. Wendy, what has been a bit, not too promising for you, and what has been very promising for you, made you happy?
Well, not so great is that we need to see a more pragmatic approach towards tackling the climate crisis in Africa. We need to be able to say to Africans that this is not just something that they have to be confined to not developing their economies and not having a dignified life. So we have to be pragmatic. We can't say no development in Africa. So I think we're still a bit far from accepting that reality. But what gives me hope is that Africans are really using their voice at this COP. They're speaking out, they're making the case for a just transition for Africa, and I think we just need to build on that.
Now, Wendy, your statement doesn't just stand true for Africa, for the entire global South. That is exactly what just transition means, is to understand the realities of these yet developing economies. This was another segment of Hope and Nope at COP27. Thank you.